The naysayers will talk about, market downturns and crashes and this and that and peaks and troughs. Yes, absolutely there is. But if you're buying to hold for the long term, if you're buying, flipping, selling, trading, that's different. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. And on this week's Property Education Masterclass, do I have a treat for you? We've got the one and only Mr. Simon Zutshci. Now, if you're involved in property in any way, if you've done anything, whether you've done HMOs, whether you've done flips, whether you've done lease options, you would have heard, trained with, listened to, or watched Simon Zutshci. He is one of the original founding fathers, really, of all of the property training that goes on in the UK today. He's an absolutely incredible guy with his own huge personal property portfolio, and then went into the training space and built the PIN network meetings as well as his property mastermind program. He's also written one of the top selling property books called Property Magic. There is another book coming out as well soon, which we touched on in this episode. Guys, if you don't know Simon, which I can't believe you wouldn't have heard of Simon if you're in property, but if you haven't, you need to listen to this episode. He is honestly one of the people who was in at the very early stages, and everybody who you may be training with currently or looking up to on socials or in the property space started most likely with Simon Zutshci. It's an incredible episode, and I feel so honored to have got an hour of his time. Guys, if you get value and knowledge from this episode, like I always say, please do me a favor and follow the show. And if you could just leave us a review, it takes just 30 seconds. It helps us so much, put so much work into this. We really appreciate it. So until then, guys, settle in, get comfortable. This was a really big moment for me, and I was so privileged to share this time with Simon. Can't wait for you to hear it. Here we go. Simon Zutshci, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for asking me. I'm really excited to be here.
Mate, I am genuinely so honored to have you on the show. You are, one of the best known, well-respected people on the circuit. You are who I class as pretty much one of the founding fathers, right? Definitely of the property training scene.
I've been called a few things. That's probably one of them. Yeah.
That's got nothing to do with your age, but you are the original person that kind of trailblazed this whole thing.
I don't think anyone's been training consistently longer than I have. 21 plus years now.
It's absolutely amazing. So yeah, a very prolific property investor in your own right, founder of the Property Investors Network, PIN. Yep. There's probably nobody in the property space that doesn't know about the PIN events. Author of one of the best-selling property books that I have right here, Property Magic.
Yep.
Who, again, anyone in property, this was probably the original book. Well, you always hear the same things thrown around. You've got this one, you've got Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a couple of others, but this one's always up there near the top.
I actually recommend people to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad first, because I think that does a great job of changing the thinking and the mindset, particularly about bad debt and good debt. And then say read Property Magic afterwards, because Rich Dad Poor Dad doesn't really talk that much about property, whereas hopefully Property Magic then shows you what's possible within property. Yep. So a lot of people say they've gone that route.
Yeah, completely agree. Rich Dad Poor Dad's more of a mindset book. And then if you can kind of merge that with your very property specific book, Property Magic, you got the best of both worlds. Yeah. And then obviously hugely accomplished speaker. Again, anyone in property, everybody's seen you speak. Everybody's seen you at an event. Everybody's seen some of your online material. So, lots of media recognition, very accomplished. So once again, it's an absolute honor to have you on the show. So thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. And I know that my listeners are going to get so much good stuff from this episode. So Simon, I think it's only natural, with, you've done so much in your career. You started back in 1995, if I'm not incorrect, back 24 years old. Yeah. So I'd like to just go back. I know that you was in Cadbury's for many years.
Yes.
We've all read the book, right? We know the backstory, but I'm interested to know, how did it, where did the initial interest come from property? How did you get started? What was it that pulled you in the first place?
So I've always been quite entrepreneurial. I've always quite liked making money. It was actually very difficult because when I was at university, luckily we had grants back then. We didn't have to pay to go to university, but you still got to pay for accommodation and everything. So I finished university in 94 and I had a really good degree from a great university, but I came out without a job. So I had a period of time where I literally had no money, I had student debt, and it was really quite a depressing place to be honest. And it was about the time when the national lottery started. And I remember having no job, literally living in my student house, just doing little part-time work just to make some money. And I remember daydreaming, if I won the lottery, if I won £1 million, what would I do with that? And at the time, houses in my area in Selly Oak, next to Birmingham University where I live, were probably about 50k. And I had this idea. I thought, you know what? I'd buy 50 houses, cash, and I'd live off the income from those. And so that's
pretty good plan.
So I remember daydreaming that. And I think where the inspiration for having all the houses came from was my first landlord. My parents, my dad was a GP, fairly middle class. They had their own home, but they'd never had any investment properties per se. My sisters, again, got really good jobs in good firms as graduates and graduate trainees, but they didn't really have investments. But I think the influence came from my very first landlord. So when I was at university, I lived in halls for a couple of years. I did a 4-year course. And then my third year, I moved into a house with friends. And we had to go and sign the contracts with this landlord. And he lived on a very posh road in Edgbaston in Birmingham called Farquhar Road. Probably the most expensive.
God, that's posh. That sounds posh.
Very posh, very posh, Alex. And I went to this massive house with my friends and we signed these contracts. And I remember thinking, wow, this guy's doing all right. And as a cheeky 19-year-old, I asked him the question. I said, excuse me, hope you don't mind me asking, but this is a lovely house. What do you do for a living? And he said, well, I used to be a solicitor. Well, we all know solicitors are well paid, they earn a lot of money. But he said, but now I'm just a full-time landlord. And I didn't really know what that meant, to be honest, because I'd never rented a house. I'd lived with my parents in their home, then I'd be in the halls of residence. But it kind of so went to my head and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And he was what I call a full-time hands-on landlord. He would, well, obviously he was signing the contracts with us. He'd chase late rent. He wouldn't do the maintenance, but he'd go to the houses to check them and get his maintenance guys to do the maintenance stuff. And so one afternoon, towards the end of that first year when I'd been living in his house, he came and I said, hey, do you want a cup of tea? Sat down. And I remember having a chat with him. And I said, so do you mind me asking, how does this property thing work? And this was, by the way, this was before YouTube. This was before the internet, really. So this kind of information that people have access to now was not available. And I just asked him, and again, I probably didn't really understand what he was saying, to be honest, because it was completely off my radar. But the fundamental about, well, I buy a house and it costs me money to do that, obviously, and I sometimes do it up, sometimes it's fine. And this is what he was saying. I usually get a mortgage on it. And the idea is what I pay to the mortgage company is less than I can rent it out for. So I make a profit on every single property. And it's a bit like having a cash machine. There are lots and lots of cash machines. And I asked him, he had 100 houses in Selly Oak, and he's not with us anymore, but that portfolio is probably worth £50 million now. And guess what? He started with one, then he got a second one, then he got a couple more, and he just built it up. And again, something went to my head. And I remember thinking, when I'm rich, because I knew I was going to be wealthy at some point, when I'm rich, I'm going to get into property. So that's where that seed came. And I thought, if I won the lottery, lying on my bed in my student house in 94 when I didn't have a job and I finished university, I thought, if I win the lottery, I'm going to buy those houses. So I think that's where it all came from. And then when I got my first job in 95, which was a graduate job at Cadbury, the thing I'd gone to university for, the thing I'd kind of worked all that time and was my goal and my aspiration, as soon as I got a job, I got a house. And it was actually 4 or 5 doors up from where I was living as a student at the time. And it was an amazing house compared to the horrible student hole I was living in. And because I'm quite social, I'd live with other people. I just like the idea of renting out rooms to a couple of my mates who were still at uni. And then it's when I realized that I owned the house, but I was living for free because their rent paid the mortgage and the bills. That's when I thought, oh, this is good. I probably want to get some more of these. And that's how it all started.
So going back to your university days, Simon, I mean, obviously nobody's going to argue with the fact that you're, a very gifted entrepreneur. You've done so many things in the property space, the training space, you built up all these businesses. What was it that you think drove you to make the decision to go to university in the first place rather than go straight into business from, let's say, 18 years old?
Well, I had been entrepreneurial. Some of the things I did when I was at school, I used to volunteer, something called VSU, Volunteer Service Unit. There were different divisions, people who would, school kids would volunteer their time to help mentally handicapped or physically handicapped. And I was in the old people's group. So we used to organise kind of people to go and visit old people living on their own and people who were, kind of really quite lonely. We used to organise trips to the seaside or tea,
picnics.
Picnics, so yeah, exactly. Yeah, just stuff for them to do, basically. And that obviously needed funding, and it was a charity. So we used to do events to raise money. And one of the events we did was we decided to have a ball. So we got all the local schools together, and we were all 16, 17. We couldn't really drink at that time, but some smart person worked out, well, if you have food at an event, you can give someone a couple of drinks. So we organised this ball, all the local schools, and a very big, very posh girls' school held this event. And we raised loads of money. It was great fun. I thought, this is amazing. And I said to the committee, hey, let's do another one. They said, oh, no, too much work. Kind of. So I said, well, okay, I'll do one. So I've always been, a lot of people think about things but never take action. I've always been an action taker. So I thought, well, I'll do it. So I found a local, and I lived in Sevenoaks in Kent, which was a very quiet place. And so I found this kind of, almost like this kind of village hall attached to a pub you could hire. We got some really amazing sound system and lights. And I was organised a party, a ball, because there was nothing happening. It was kind of an end of A-levels kind of thing. And that worked well. I made some money doing that. So I thought that was good. And actually, when I was at university, I continued organising parties and balls at university as well. So I've always been quite entrepreneurial. But really, I'm very traditional. My dad was a doctor, as I said. My sisters were older than me, had been to university, they'd got good jobs. And I was just conditioned that was the thing you did. Starting your own business wasn't really something that was on the agenda. It was when you get a good education, you go and get a good job, and that's how you become wealthy. So I think that was just the path I went down that many people follow. And it's only when I was at university and doing parties and things, and one of my hobbies is magic, which is one of my books called Property Magic. I was doing kids' parties and after dinner cabaret and stuff. And actually, I had said to my mum, you know what, I'm just going to be a magician. I'm going to do this. And my mum very wisely said to me, Simon, look, you're smart enough to go to university. Why don't you use that opportunity? And you can still do magic as well, but use that opportunity. You got into a good university. And so I followed her and my dad's advice and did that. And I think it was great going to university, but I went not with the intention because I wanted to be an engineer. I did engineering and business. I actually wanted to do business, but by the traditional measure of intelligence, i.e. A-levels, I wasn't smart enough to get into business school. The more popular a course, the higher education needs. So I actually got into business through the back door of doing engineering. So I did engineering and business, and the A-level requirements were much lower. I think I needed 3 C's instead of 3 B's or 3 A's, 2 B's and an A to do business. So that's my way of getting into business. And actually engineering was okay. It's business is easy compared to engineering, but interestingly less grades required because it's not as popular. So I didn't expect to be doing an entrepreneurial thing, even though maybe in my heart I kind of quite like the idea of that. I was fully bought into, I'm going to get a great education, get a really good degree, then get a really good job at a really company, work my way up and maybe become a director one day. That's what I thought I'd do.
Right. So with the property stuff, moving into that and obviously, moving into what became your main career of building up the property portfolio and then obviously moving into the training space, building, probably the biggest training company in the UK. Or even global, you can tell me how big it actually got. I'd be interested to know.
I don't think we're the biggest. I think there are other people who have bigger companies,
right?
And maybe they're better at marketing than me. I don't know, but actually, most of those companies they often don't do the training themselves. And actually, I'm in the. I don't have to do anything. I'm financially independent, but and sometimes people who are a bit cynical, skeptical say, well, if you're so rich, why do you training? Well, I can tell those people are still doing a job because the whole point is when you're financially independent, you then choose what you do with time.
It's so true.
I love what I do, right? So, and for anyone listening to this, I think your primary objective, the reason you should invest in property is to create a financial income coming in. So no matter what happens to you, you're safe and secure and your family is safe and secure. And then when you have that freedom, you can then choose what you do with your time. And I choose to do this. And I won't do it forever, but for the moment, I enjoy doing it. And I do get rewarded very well. I get paid very well for what I do because our students get great results.
And you genuinely love it, which is obvious. You're so passionate about it.
Love it. If you see me speak, you speak to one of our events, you'll see I love it. I get frustrated sometimes. I get annoyed when people don't take action because I don't think property investing is actually difficult. I don't think it's easy, but I don't think it's actually very straightforward. All you have to do is follow the process. And if you keep going and don't give up, you will get results. But
so that was where I was going, Simon, with the question. So we're going back, in the nicest possible way, quite a few years when you started building your portfolio. Yeah. And like you referred to earlier, this was before YouTube. It was before the gazillion ads you were getting bombarded with. Yes. It was before, the opportunity to do one of 100,000 different strategies. Yeah. So you met someone that just said, this is what I do. You saw that it worked and you just went out and you repeated that process. Yeah. Do you think that in a kind of weird, twisted way, it was kind of easier back then because you didn't have all of this noise and all of these opportunities and distractions?
Yes and no. Yes and no. So definitely, I think there's a problem at the moment. There's so much information out there. There's definitely information. I think a lot of people struggle. They want to get into it. They have no idea how or where to start. They're being told different contradictory things about it. So that's definitely a challenge. But remember when I first started, there weren't buy-to-let mortgages. Buy-to-let mortgages only came in 1998. So when I was trying to buy my second property and I decided to keep my first one, rent that out and move into a second one as my home, a bit closer to Cadbury's, take my friends with me, I really struggled to get the finance on it. And I was working with a financial advisor from the Lloyd's Group. And he was saying, it's you're getting a second house. That's really difficult. You're going to have to put a massive, I had to put a 30% deposit down for my second house. Whereas normally a first time buyer, my first house, I put down 5% as a first time buyer. But because it was technically a second residential home, I had to put 30% down. So I wouldn't say I was ahead of my time, but it was what I was trying to do wasn't easy. Whereas now, someone completely new to property with no experience at all, as long as they've got a reasonable credit rating, can get a buy-to-let mortgage. So that's definitely easier now. And also, I learned the hard way. I learned the hard way by making mistakes. And I obviously did okay, but I could have done so much better if I had someone like me showing me what to do and holding my hand rather than making those expensive mistakes myself, and I meet people who are trying to do it on their own and they make an expensive mistake and that happens. Things go wrong in property, but unfortunately that puts them off. They think, I tried it didn't work. And that's such a shame because when you do it correctly, there's nothing better financially than investing in property. And sometimes people are put off by silly mistakes that many people make.
What would you say, Simon, if, there's a lot of people that are listening to you now and probably thinking, well, Simon, you know what, good for you. Back then you could buy a place for 50,000, right? So even though you had to put down a 30% deposit, and yes, house prices are a lot higher today, but like you said, there are more opportunities. There are more creative strategies now that we're aware of. But how would you respond to that? People that say, look, a place in my area is pushing £500,000. Yeah. I've got no chance of getting started.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's how long have you got to answer that question, right? But let me give you a couple of really quick thoughts. First of all, the first thing is people are making the assumption there that they have to use their money to invest. And most people do use their own money at first and run out of money and then have to find a different creative way of doing it. Some people start with not a lot of money in the first place, right? So I will always say, if you get good at finding good deals, and by a good deal, I mean a profitable, a property that makes money for you. So that's one thing, you've got to learn how to do that, right? If you do that, when you run out of your own cash, there are plenty of people out there who have money, but they don't have the knowledge, the time, or the inclination to find deals themselves. And if it's a good, profitable deal, you could share some of that profit with someone else. So that's the first thing. No matter where you live, if you get good at finding deals, there are deals everywhere when you know how to look for them. You can get other people to fund them. That's the first thing. Secondly, there are strategies you can use, such as rent to rent, where you don't actually buy it, you're renting it from a landlord, you get the cash flow, or better than rent to rent, purchase lease options, where you also have the right to buy the property in the future, or even vendor finance, where the seller wants to get rid of the property and they help you fund that purchase. And again, this is all specialist knowledge. You need to learn these things, but these are strategies that I and my students are using right now to acquire property. So that's where you're not using a lot of your own money. And then the final thing about pricing is, well, you know what? When I bought my first house, I bought it for £48,500, and everything's relevant. That was a lot of money to me. So I was earning about £14,500 as a graduate trainee. So, that was a lot of money to me then. And interestingly, when I bought my second house, I was starting to look around, and my first house was in Selly Oak, and that's a student area, very popular. I also looked at Bourneville, which is just next to where Cadbury's is. And I was looking at a similar house that I'd bought just maybe 2.5-3 years before for £48,500 in Selly Oak. And a similar house in Bourneville was £80,000. And I was thinking, £80,000? That's ridiculous. Who would pay that much on property? That's crazy. That's never worth that. And I actually went to an area called Selly Oak that was a bit further from the university, but next to Bourneville. And I bought my next house, which was bigger than my first one, for £55,000. So everything's relative. At the time, it seemed expensive. Anyone listening to this who's maybe owned their own home for a number of years, if they think back to when and if you don't own a home yet, if you're quite young, listen, go and ask your parents. Say, when did you buy your first house? And how much did you buy that for? So my first house was 1995, £48,500, and asked them, how much is it worth now? And I know I actually sold that. I don't normally sell property, but for various reasons, I did sell that very first property this year, actually. And I sold it probably at a slight discount off the true market value. It needed a bit of a refurb. I sold it to someone who's spent a lot of money, made it a really nice 6-bed HMO now. I sold it for $330,000. So in 27 years or so, it's doubled in value, it's doubled again, and it's almost doubled again. That's what happens typically over a long enough period. Pretty much property doubles every 10 years. And I've certainly seen that myself. Now, if you'd have told me back in 1995, the house I was spending what I felt was a lot of money for, £48,500, 3 times my salary, more than that that house in 30 years would have doubled again. I would have said, there's no way, you're crazy. And so the point of this story is, although prices might seem high right now, in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you would have wished you bought a lot more at the price you're buying them at now. And that's because prices go up because of inflation, obviously. And we live on this island with a limited amount of accommodation and an increasing population. So yes, it would have been great for you to buy a lot more property 20 years ago. But if you didn't do that, the second best time is right now.
Yeah, completely agree. If you love to travel like me and you understand the power in escaping the money for time exchange trap, but you just don't know how to do it, then building an Airbnb consultancy business could be exactly what you have been looking for. Right now in the UK, there is a completely untapped opportunity through helping struggling Airbnb hosts by turning around their underperforming properties and generating you huge commission payments in the process. We are going to teach you all of the tools and all of the techniques that we've learned over the last 5 years through building our very own multiple 6-figure Airbnb business, arming you with everything that you need to swoop in and save the day. Minimal startup costs, 0 risk, and almost unlimited potential. Sound good? Welcome to the Airbnb Consultant. Contact us through any of the channels included in the studio notes to get the conversation started. It's a mindset thing, isn't it? It's about being able to look ahead and understand these things and understand the fact that property does almost double on average every 10 years across the UK. Obviously, there's differences depending on where you are, but completely agree.
Depending when you're on the property cycle, but if over a long enough period, the trend is it doubles over that time period. Yeah.
And this is the thing, that the naysayers will talk about, market downturns and crashes and this and that and peaks and troughs. Yes, absolutely there is. But if you're buying to hold for the long term, if you're buying, flipping, selling, trading, that's different. But if buying to hold, that it doesn't matter what's going on with the economy. There are always going to be people that need to rent those rooms in HMOs, rent those houses as buy-to-lets, whatever it is. If you've got accommodation or properties that you can hold, you will always rent it and make an income from those tangible assets.
Absolutely. And you're totally right. It doesn't really matter what's happening in the market. In fact, when the markets come down, people go, oh my God, the value of my property is coming down, crashing. No, that's the time to buy more because you're paying less for it than you did a year or two when it was cost more. So it is a different way of thinking.
Yeah. Absolutely. And as they say, what is the saying? You hear it kicks around that, more millionaires are made in a downturn.
Downturn, absolutely.
In a crash.
Most people are sitting back going, oh my God, what do I do? Panicking. Whereas the successful people recognize it as an opportunity. And I believe, we're not, at the time we're recording this, we're not in a market crash. Some people have said there's going to be a market crash. I'm not sure if that's correct. We certainly had a correction down from the boom that was during the unexpected boom during COVID years. Things went crazy for various reasons, and it's definitely come down now. But right now, as we record this, I think there's incredible opportunity because a lot of investors are sitting back. In July 24, we had the new Labour government come in. A lot of people are worried about what they might do, and they will definitely make some changes, and they probably generally won't be good for landlords. But guess what? That means more and more landlords are selling up, which has been a trend for the last 7 years, by the way. More people selling up than getting into the market, which is good for those of us coming in or those who want to build our portfolio because it's more people to buy from. If the market comes down, you can buy at a better price. And right now, where we have this buyer's market, guess what? Strategies such as purchase option, vendor finance are easier to do now in this market than they are when the market's booming. So if you have the right mindset and belief and knowledge, there's always opportunities. You have to look harder in a booming market, but there's always opportunities.
Yeah, and I think being able to invest in an educated way, right? Because, for example, a lot of buy-to-let landlords are offloading due to Section 24. If you know about that and you know how to structure the company in order to, do your best to avoid that, then, there's certain ways that you can get around it. But Simon, in your, I'm interested to know in your own personal investing journey, people might look at you, and it made me laugh when you said, inside when you said that you just sold this property, the first one that you bought. So I imagined someone trying to come to you with some kind of creative finance offer or some, and not knowing who you were. That'd be quite funny. Yeah. But have you had any, major bad deals and huge, things that have gone wrong in your career? Because it's easy to look at you and think, Simon's got it all wrapped up and, he's done it all perfect.
Of course not. And if anyone is successful telling you they haven't had problems, they are just a liar. Okay. And actually probably the more deals you've done, the more chance you've had some mistakes. So I've had some bad tenants. I've had some, in the booming early 2000, mid 2000, buying off plan was very popular. And actually off plan, where you buy something before it's built, can be a good strategy in a rising market. Then you could buy something and sell it before you completed. Often you could buy them no money down. So at the time, they seemed like a great deal. But I've definitely got properties in my portfolio. I had properties in my portfolio, which I'd purchased, which at the time, knowing what I knew then, seemed like a good deal. But knowing what I know now, some of those properties, if I had a second chance, I wouldn't buy them again, even if there were no money down deals at the time. And often that's come from maybe a lack of knowledge, or often a lack of due diligence, Buying a property just because it's cheap, buying it because you don't need to put money doesn't mean it's a good deal. Some of them I bought for that reason, but actually I should have done more due diligence on the area. And that's kind of why I came up with the golden rules in property magic, because I noticed that I had made mistakes and other people were making similar mistakes. And I wanted some kind of reference people could use to try and minimize those mistakes. So I've made mistakes. I've also sometimes gone into joint ventures with people that seemed like a good idea. I didn't maybe do enough due diligence on them. I've lent money to people that's been tied up in projects, and that happens a long time. That has a knock-on effect if you're borrowing from other people as well. But I think I think a really important thing that everyone needs to accept is whatever decisions you make, whether it's in property, business, in life, we need to accept personal responsibility for all the decisions we make. I've gone into some JVs that have been phenomenally good. I've gone into some that have not worked, but I can't blame the other person. I have to accept responsibility for my part. There's always two sides of the story. And if you start trying to blame and point the finger at other people, I think that's just not a responsible thing to do, because ultimately we're all responsible for the decisions we make.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. You got to be responsible for your decisions. Have you ever had a time in your life, Simon, with everything that you've done where, you've been scared that you're going to lose it all?
Yeah, that's happened a few times. I think sometimes uncertainty, when COVID came, I thought, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen now? I mean, it might be the end of the world, so I do have those kind of things. But then also, I mean, I have invested and I continue to invest a lot in myself and in my personal development and mindset. And one of the people I invested in a long time ago, I did Tony Robbins' entire university mastery. And Tony Robbins has this great saying. I'm not sure if it was him or maybe Jim Rohn it came from originally, but they talk about, if at all possible, you want to stop worrying about things that you can't control and only focus on things that you can control. And that's easier said than done. But when COVID came and we had all this uncertainty, I thought, okay, we don't know what's going to happen. Don't know what's going to happen. My tenant's going to be able to pay. We ran a live events training business. You can't do live events anymore. So what's going to happen, right? So, but rather than worrying about things you can't control, what can you do? And for our live events business, which is a multi-million pound business, but we have massive costs. We've got team, hotels, etc. I thought, what can we do? And we were very, very quick to adapt. In fact, I saw it coming. I saw lockdowns coming, and I said to my team, look, I don't think we're going to be able to run live events. And before the decision came, we had a plan in place. Okay, what do we do if we can't run PIN meetings? We had 40, 50 around the country. What if we can't do those? And we've got commitments to hotels and etc. And so we put a plan in place, and it happened one way. And I think it was just before the lockdown announcement came out. I said, right. And it was because someone was going to be flying over to speaking at one of my mastermind sessions. They live in Spain, having done our property course and replaced their income, etc. They were coming over, and they called me and said, I can't come because all the flights from Spain have stopped. This was on Saturday. And I said, don't worry, we'll do it virtually. And I called my events team and said, right, that's it. Push the button. Monday, we're going virtual. And so we did that. I think it was about the same, just before the stay-at-home announcement. Whereas a lot of the other companies that run live events, they stopped doing their events, and they weren't prepared for what was going to happen. But it was pretty obvious what was going to happen. So I think in life we need to not worry about things we can't control, but things we can control. Okay, what do we do? What's the contingency? And plan for eventuality. And I think that's a good thing. And in a similar way, when a lot of landlords were panicking when the government said in 2020, don't worry, tenants, if you can't afford your rent, there are going to be these rent holidays. And at the same time, they said to the landlords, they said, don't worry, if you can't afford a good mortgage, there are going to be mortgage holidays. And unfortunately, many landlords had this knee-jerk reaction, said, I'm going to get these mortgage holidays. And we said in our case, said, guys, look, it's great that you can do that. But if you don't need to have a mortgage holiday, don't get a mortgage holiday. Because guess what? Mortgage companies are going to take a note of that. And if you're calling up saying, I can't afford my mortgage, can I have a holiday, please? Don't you think they're going to look at that note next time you want to go for a remortgage or a mortgage?
It's going to affect you in some way, for sure.
Of course it is. So you've got to think about things. You avoid knee-jerk reactions and avoid reacting with the crowd. You've got to sit back. And that's why being in a community, having a coach or other people you can check base with is so important, because if you're doing this stuff in isolation, you can make some dumb decisions.
It's the same as the bounce back loan, Simon. I mean, how many people, when they saw that as, a way of getting this, free £50,000, they're queuing up at the door without thinking, well, what's the consequences of this? Am I going to have to pay it back? What's the rates going to be? Is it going to affect my credit? So everybody just...
You know what? I think you're absolutely right. But actually, that's one of the reasons the property market boomed, because some people took those loans out and then invested it in property. And that wasn't what it was meant for, of course, but that's one of the reasons why the market boomed. That's why there was so much demand.
A lot of people took those loans and then skipped off to Spain. Never came back.
There's a massive of fraud. People took loads of loans and just did a runner, which how much could you get? I mean, it depends how many companies you had, right? But that is a very short, so it's not worth for a couple of £100,000, or even if it was £1 million, that's not enough to live on. Why would you do that? That's just such short-term thinking. That's pretty stupid, I think.
But, people made millions out of that. It was such a crazy time because I live in Spain as well. That's where I am now, and I was in Spain during that time.
You took out all those bounce back loans.
That's because I took all the bounce back loans and skipped off to Spain. But I remember something that sticks in my mind to this day in the middle of all that craziness, and it was strict here. Like we could go, I think, 100 meters from where you lived. Only if you had a dog. So everybody was sharing each other's dogs. These poor dogs were walking 100 miles a day. And, but you'd see people riding around on like scooters with full masks on, in cars with the roof down with the masks on, by themselves. It was complete madness. It was such a crazy time, but glad we got through it. Something else that comes to mind, Simon, I want to ask you is, where does the person who founded a lot of this stuff that everybody's now teaching today, the lease options, the vendor finance, the HMOs, refurbishments and whatever it is, all these different strategies. Where does the person who, for a lot of people, kind of kickstarted that whole thing, where did you go to get trained and mentored and taught? Where did you go for this stuff?
The first 7 years up until 2002, I'd had no training, nothing at all. There were probably books I could read. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, definitely. I think it was about 2000, 2001 I read, but I hadn't read any property books or anything. And maybe I'm a bit stupid like that. I probably should have gone and found a book to read, but I didn't. I was just kind of learning through trial and error. And then I left Cadbury's in 2001. I hadn't quite replaced my income by that point, but I had enough to live on. So that's why I made that decision.
Just on that note, Simon, sorry, just to interject. When you left Cadbury's,
yes,
was there an element of the golden handcuffs that made you kind of think? Because obviously you must have been making a lot of money, corporate job, all the securities. Was there any?
So I wasn't on a huge salary. I'd finished my graduate scheme. I'd become a senior manager. That's the idea. You go around the business, hoping someone offers you a job, and I did that. But I wasn't on a huge salary. I wasn't, if this was like 20 plus years ago in 2001, I think I was on something like 35,000 or something like that. So it wasn't a huge amount, I mean, graduates probably start on that these days. I don't know, but so it wasn't a huge amount. But actually, I had my properties and I had my part-time nightclub business that was also making me money. And I by the way, I love my job. I love Cadbury's. It was a brilliant company to work for. There were really nice people there. I love the product.
Was there anything like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory? That's how I imagine it.
It was just like that. It was fountains of chocolate all over the place, little Oompa Loompas. It was just like that, honestly. But you could, if you worked in the factories, you could eat fresh chocolate off the production line. I tell you, once you tasted that,
no way.
Quite like it. When it's slightly warm still, it's amazing. But still, so I loved all of that. But you know what, Alex? I like my freedom a bit more. I can only have like 5 weeks holiday a year, and that's not enough. And I thought there was another way of doing it. And I thought, actually, although I liked it, and something that I didn't enjoy, but I thought, I just like the idea of working for myself, having that freedom and independence. So I hadn't replaced my income, but I had enough to cover all my living expenses. So I knew if something happened to me and I couldn't work, I was fine. So I'd left work. And then in 2002, a leaflet came through my door, a letter, a flyer. I was obviously on someone's mailing list because I was investing in my personal development. So a lot of things I've learned have come from personal. And I think I didn't invent HMOs. I didn't invent lease options. I was maybe one of the first people speaking about those things. But I think something I did bring to the property world, I think my claim to fame is I was probably the very first person speaking about mindset. You get a lot of people training strategies and things, but I was the only person in the early 2000s speaking about the importance of mindset. And the reason I knew that was important because I'd started teaching other people in 2003, just at PIN meetings. People say, it's great coming to PIN, but it's taken a long time to go. Could you maybe run a day? And I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a go. And I was teaching people just the basic strategies. And getting great feedback from everyone, offering money back guarantees. No one ever wanted their money back. People go out, and I meet people at PIN meetings later on. And those early to mid 2000s was such a good time to invest because the market was booming. You could buy anything now, and 6 months later, it would be worth more. Anybody could get finance. If you could fog up a mirror, you could borrow money. Literally, it was that simple. And there wasn't as much competition. There's more competition now, maybe. And some people were doing it, but a lot of people would come on a course and not do it. And I got really frustrated by that. And I realized knowledge alone is not enough. The fear we have in our head and the little voice talking to us saying, oh, you can't do that. Or what if this happened? What holds me back? So I think I'm definitely one of the first people started speaking about mindset. But going back to your question, in 2002, I had this leaflet come through and they talked about this property course. It was a free 2-hour training. It was a company called Russ Whitney, who doesn't exist anymore. They actually morphed and changed their name many, many times over the last 20 years. They don't exist anymore. And it said, do you want to be a property millionaire? And I thought, what? I don't think I'm a property millionaire. That sounds good. So I went along to this free talk and I sat there and some of the things they talked about I knew, but they talked about a few things I didn't know. And I like to think I'm a very open-minded person, always keen to learn more, and I'm a lifelong learner. So I paid the £3,000 it was, went with my girlfriend at the time to this 3-day event down in, I think it was Chelsea Football Club or whatever. And it was like hundreds of people in the room. And I think the training was on by a lady called Jill Fielding, who is also, she doesn't do it anymore, but she was doing training courses as well. And it was good. And I learned about things like, using other people's money, and I learned about using credit. And I came straight off that course and I bought a flat with my then girlfriend. We bought it together in her name because she was a first-time buyer. And so I'd never done before that course. I bought it with a credit card. It's a credit card check. There's a 10% deposit. We bought slightly below market value. We did a refurb. The market was going up. We refinanced 6 months later and got our money back. So it was a no money left in deal. I'd never done that before. So even though I had left my job, you can always learn more. If you have an open mind to do some training, you always learn more. And that was great. But what happened, Alex, I came off that. I bought that one property and I lost momentum. And I felt very lonely because no one around me knew what I was doing or really understood it. And that's why in 2003, I set up PIN. Because I went online, because obviously the internet was around then. I went on and see there was some sort of group. And I was going to a personal development group, something called the Yes Group in Birmingham. People have done Tony Robbins training. There's a big one in London as well. But there was nothing for property investors. So I went online and did a search. So I thought, again, I'll just do it myself. So I set up a group initially in Birmingham. And it was all self-interest. It was purely selfish. I wanted to meet other people like me who I could talk to. We could share problems, who got what I did and understood it. And that's how that PIN started. And a lot of people said to me at that meeting, Simon, how come we don't have to work? And I said, no, I do. I've got my properties. I've got my nightclub. No. You don't go to work. How come you don't have to go to work? And then that's when I realized what I'd done was actually a bit different from many other people. Certainly, 21 years ago, it was very different. And that's how I started teaching people. And then people said, well, and I actually started doing a PIN meeting in Birmingham. I think it was London, Bristol, and I think Manchester. And I was running them all myself, doing one each week. So each month there'd be 4 meetings and I'd run them. And I kind of thought, this is a bit crazy, me running around the country doing this. And then other people said to me, hey, Simon, can I run a meeting? And generally people who'd done our training, who were getting results and they recognized the value of networking, connecting with people. They didn't want to come to one of those 4 locations. So that's how we started setting up meetings around the country. Now 50 plus meetings around the UK and also in the Netherlands and Dubai. And that's how we kind of grown to such a big network.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. So how do you feel about how the world's changed now with obviously the internet boom, social media? Everybody's jumped on the bandwagon of starting courses and training and the gurus and saying this and that and financial freedom in 7 days and all the rest of the bullshit that we know is just complete crap. But how do you feel about that? Is it do you feel, are you worried about it? Do you feel the competition or do you just think that it's all just a big joke and you're just going to carry on doing it?
Really mixed feelings, I think. I think competition is good. I think it's good there are some people doing it, and I think that, that's healthy for an industry to have competition rather than monopoly. So that's great. I'm slightly concerned about some of the things that people are being told that are, I think, just wrong. And look, everyone has a bit of marketing hype, that's fine. But I won't name any names here, but there are companies. We are, right now as we record this, we are in a buyer's market. It's certainly on average stagnating. Some areas going up a bit, some are coming down. But there's definitely, it's not a booming market. And there is a very well-known property company who are out there and they do a lot of training. They're very good at their marketing and they're quite a big company. And they're telling people, oh, you should be doing off-plan property. And I think that's one of the worst things you could be doing right now because you're always paying a premium for it. Even if you're buying at a discount, it's always a premium. And I learned this 20 years ago, right? But, and I think the reason they do that is because there's a conflict of interest because they're then selling people those properties. And so when I started, so I still invest myself and I was doing off-plan then, for example, and I realized if I went to a developer and bought the last few units on their site, I'd get a better deal than just bought one. So in the early days, I was buying stuff myself and some people at pin leases, I was selling to them as well. But I soon stopped that because I realized actually that's a conflict of interest. And although I can make really good money selling property, I don't want to do that. I want to do training because that's what I love to do. So I'm just going to train. So I'm going to be so if someone comes to me saying, hey, do you think it's a good deal? I can give them completely impartial advice saying, I think it's good or bad for these reasons. And it's not because I'm getting a commission. So for that reason, we decided to stop. And for 20 years, I've not sold property. Okay. Well, 18 years. And so that's one thing. I think you've got to be careful and look at people's agendas. There are also a lot of people who make claims like, I've been in property 40 years. Well, actually, maybe they've owned property 40 years, but they've certainly not been investing. And there's a huge difference between a property owner and being an actual investor. So if you're looking to train with someone, I'd ask them some questions. I'd say, first of all, how long have you actually had properties? How long have you had, and it might be flipping properties fine, or maybe you've had properties you're renting out. How long have you been a landlord? Okay. That's one thing. And then also, just because someone's been successful investing themselves, that doesn't mean they're any good at teaching other people to do what they've done. So I don't know, well, how long have you been teaching people? And more importantly, how successful have your students been? And I kind of have a bit of an advantage there because I've been doing it so long. We have so many successful students. In fact, probably half the people who are out there training courses, guess where they learned in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that I've done a fair bit with Rick Gannon, who's going to be coming on. He's going to be coming on the show. Yeah, he was one of your mastermind students. So, but yeah, it is a problem, I think, Simon. We do a little bit of coaching ourselves in the SA space, in the service accommodation market, and we get a lot of people calling us that have already invested with other people, again, not mentioning any names, but people with, the marketing spend and, all the ads everywhere. And they just jump headfirst into the funnel. They're vulnerable people. A lot of people, their backs up against the wall. They've got a credit card. They're desperately searching for that silver bullet. And they just go with the person that they see the most popping up on their social media feeds. And then once they've spent that money,
marketing, but not necessarily
marketing.
Yeah. So
then they spend that money. They come back to us. We have a conversation and they say, God, we love, I love what you're saying. You sound genuine. You sound ethical, which is, we genuinely try to do that, but they're already invested with these other people and then they're stuck, and their money is in there. They can't get the money back. So we have conversations like that all the time. And it's like you said, the same names keep coming up time and time and time again. It's the same people.
And it's a problem because what happens is, unfortunately, it gives the whole industry a bad name.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few keyboard warriors out there who would say, oh, why are you paying for training? You shouldn't do it. I did it all myself. But look, I kind of did it myself, right? And there are other people who've done it themselves. But having done it that way, and also having, I'm a big, I think the investment I make in myself, as long as I pick the right training, and even those people who've spent money with someone else and they haven't quite got the results they wanted, or it wasn't what they thought, and that does happen, and that's a real shame. I would encourage those people. You got to look for what you did get. You would have got something out of it, and you got to, okay, you spent the money now, salvage it by saying, oh, what are the lessons I've got and what can I do and how can I move forward? And I think very often, Alex, the problem is people they might have given them knowledge, but like I said earlier, I learned 20 years ago that knowledge alone is often not enough. It's the support that sometimes people are lacking, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And having that is self-belief. I mean, you're right. Mindset, it's the absolute pillars of, you can have all the knowledge in the world. You could give them all the knowledge in the world. I could give them all the knowledge in the world. But unless they honestly believe that they can do it and they've got that support network around them, then yeah, absolutely. Nothing's going to happen.
One of the ways we do a lot of our events, and I've changed my podcast from just an audio one to now a video one, and I actually do interviews like you do, because I think they're more interesting, really. And we're bringing a lot of our successful students onto those to talk about what they've done, because one of the best ways to build your belief that you could, because you can do this, by the way. If you're listening to this, that the very fact you're listening to this shows that you're ambitious, you want to achieve more. You can absolutely do. If you get the right knowledge, the right mindset support, you can achieve anything you want to achieve. And one of the ways you can build your belief is by looking at other people, whether they've trained with us or whoever they've trained with. Look at people who've been successful, because they're just ordinary people. They're just ordinary people like you who might have done extraordinary things, but that will build belief that this, first of all, is possible, and you can absolutely do it as well.
I think, especially in the UK at the moment, everything's on such a negative spin on everything, with the cost of living crisis, the inflation, all the immigration, all the bad news, all the doom and gloom. And I think and I know people who are in, dead-end jobs, they've got no money, living week to week, literally living on a breadline. And, for those people, the idea of having any kind of success in property, ever owning a property, ever making any real money, it's so, it's such a far away idea that it's even just getting started is unimaginable, for a lot of people when you're in that negative mindset.
But you know what? What I'd say to those people is, and I get it. And by the way, when I've kind of been there, right? When I finished university, I was in debt. I had no job. I was living in a cheap, terrible student house because it was all I could afford. And I couldn't go home because my dad had retired early at 57 because he wasn't very well. And they moved down to south of France. You go live in the south of France, you poor bastard. But I couldn't go into there because I couldn't apply for jobs if I was living in the south. I couldn't go to interviews. So I had to be in a really terrible house in Birmingham, not feeling great about myself. And you know what happened? Maybe I had a bit of an education, but I said, you know what? The only way I can do something about this is if I decide to do something about it. And some of my friends at university, who I don't think are any smarter than me, they got some good jobs and I didn't. And I think, to be honest, I didn't put enough effort into my job application on my phone. I did like seven application forms. This was, again, before the internet, no copy and paste. You've got to handwrite these forms, 4 or 5 pages long. And I had did a combined honours degree, so 2 dissertations my final year. My excuse was I was too busy to do more applications. But what happened when I got out of university and I didn't have a job and I had no money, that was the motivation for me to say, I am not meant to be doing this. And I put a stake in the ground and I got a part-time job. That was a full-time job just to pay the bills and to live and to show I was employable. And I spent evenings and weekends. I didn't have the money to go out, and I sacrificed that time to put the time and effort in to do 77 graduate applications. So I 10x'd my effort from before, but I had the time to do it. I made the time to do it. And then I got 7 first stage interviews, 4 second stage, and I got 2 job offers. I got offered Boots, their international group based in Nottingham, to do finance, which I thought that's a pretty good thing to do. And I got Cadbury's, and I chose Cadbury's in the end, to be honest, because I didn't want to have another 3 years of exams doing finance. Also, it was in my comfort zone, to be perfectly honest, staying in Birmingham where I already knew people. And finally, because I like chocolate. So, but it's only because I made the decision. I didn't want to live a shit life. And I had excuse my French, but it was a pretty shit life at the time. And I was really, really low, but I made the decision. Now, the good thing that people haven't, although there is a lot of information, someone who doesn't have a job, guess what? They've got time. They've got time, and they can go and watch inspirational case studies of what other people have done and try and build their beliefs. Say, well, this is possible. And we've got people who've come from literally nothing, or they've even been bankrupt. They've had no way of getting finance. But I truly believe if you decide to do something and you really commit to do it and put in that. It's not easy. It's just not easy, but it's possible. And if you make the commitment and you keep going, and the problem is that it's too many people, they dabble, they try something, they give up too easily. In this microwave society, people want instant results. And you've got to realize, if you start a business, people don't get this. Most businesses don't make money for the first year or two. Most businesses fold. But if you persevere like I have for so long, and by the way, I've had lots of businesses that haven't worked, but too many people, they don't want to fail. They don't want rejection. And unfortunately, the school system is lining generations of people up for failure now, because you can't compete in school. You can't have winners and losers.
Yeah.
What a load of crap that is. That's not preparing people for, I'm starting
a load of bollocks. You can say it.
It's not preparing people for the real world, is it? Life is hard. Life is shit. But you either accept that, or you say, no, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to want more in my life. And there's so much free information out there. You cannot say you don't know what to do. Get inspired by someone, start from it. And there's lots of things you can do, very, very low cost or no money down, to properties is one of those ways. But there are lots of things you can do. If you just have some initiative, you can watch free webinars and probably get enough information from those to at least get going. I don't think there's any, again, that's people not accepting response. I sympathize with the problem. I've been there myself, but you need to accept personal responsibility for your success or failure.
Simon, there's so much that I wanted to ask you, and this always happens, when I've got really interesting guests on the show, the clock's like on triple speed. So your training company, I wanted to ask you, you built this behemoth training company, so many people having so many success stories, you're so well known in the industry, you built this huge company, and then you sold it.
Yeah.
And why did you sell it?
Well, first of all, I got made an offer I couldn't refuse. I didn't build it to sell because I enjoy doing it. I thought I'd doing this till I can no longer do it. But I just got made a really good offer, and the deal was, hey, sell this company. We'll pay you loads for it. Some was cash, mainly shares, which didn't work out so well. But that's another story for another podcast, maybe. But they said, we want you to stay on. We'll pay you as CEO to run the business. So we'll pay you. You don't have any of the hassle of running the business. So I thought, well, that sounds like a pretty good deal, really. So, I sold it.
Just playing devil's advocate here. I don't want to just tell you how great you are for the whole time. I want to challenge you a little bit. So what would you say if I said to you, or that people that are listening to this might say, well, Simon has sold this company and exited this training company, or at least, cashed out because the future of property investing with this crazy Labour government now in power and all the other people that are out there, hundreds of thousands of new people every day entering this space due to all of the additional training companies, it's just not doable anymore.
So my answer then would be, I'm going to be doing more property deals in the next 18 months because it's such a good time to do it than I probably have in the last 5 years. So I am massively stepping up the activity I'm doing in property. And in fact, I would do more if I wasn't doing all the training. If I just
you're talking about your personal investing?
My personal investing, yeah. If I wanted to just make money, I probably wouldn't do any training. I'd just be doing property deals. Because I think there's so much opportunity in the market right now. Because of the exact reason you said, a lot of people say, there's too much competition, the Labour's in, etc. These are all excuses. But actually it's an opportunity. So if I wanted to make the most money out, I wouldn't do any training. I would just focus on the property stuff. But I do the training because I love it. I get a massive personal boost, and I get a massive feeling of significance when I know someone who, they've done the hard work, by the way, they've gone and done it. But I've helped change their thinking. I've given them the strategies. They've gone and done it. We've maybe held them to account. They've gone and done amazing things. They've changed their life. They've changed their family's life. And I've just been a little bit of a cat. I get a massive buzz from doing that. And I like doing that.
So while I've got the man of the moment sitting in front of me, I've got to ask you, what is it that Simon Zutshci is personally investing in? What is your go-to strategy out of everything that you teach and talk about?
Okay. If I lost everything and had to start again, I would absolutely focus on purchase lease options, which work in conjunction with, no matter what strategy we do, single lets, service accommodation as you do, HMOs, commercial to resident, in the right circumstances, purchase options can be used in all of those. The problem is most people either don't know what they are or they've done some bad and incorrect training. They don't get it. And I would say if you think you know what an option is, but you haven't done an option yet, you don't know enough about options. They do not work all the time. Absolutely not. But when they work, they're amazing. So if I lost everything, I'd focus on that. And so that's one thing I would do, and I am doing, and I'm doing more of that. But I'm actually going.
Is that on residential stuff, Simon, or is that commercial stuff?
Residential, but
You're doing residential.
The world of commercial, so it works in commercial as well. In fact, all the big land buyers, all the big companies like B&Q, etc., they do a lot of options. Okay, so it comes from commercial, but you can absolutely use it in residential. But the actual strategy I'm using, and this is again through networking and meeting the right kind of people, is I have a very, very big property goal. I don't mind sharing it here if you want me to. I have a very big goal of taking some of my existing properties and also acquiring more, whether it's doing an option on it or doing joint ventures with people who are bringing properties to us. But through networking, I've met someone who's got a lot of knowledge in the specialist supported housing market. And this person in particular has sold properties to pension companies and real estate investment trusts. Now, just a word of caution here. There are a lot of people in this market who don't really understand it. And there are people who are putting their properties with companies for 5-7 years on allegedly full repairing leases. But when you look at the contracts, they are not good contracts for the property owner. And I think there's going to be a real scandal in the industry in 3 or 4 years' time, people getting property back that are not in a good condition or whatever it is. So you've got to learn how to do this correctly. And I am not an expert in this field, by the way. I'm not an expert. I know a bit, but I'm not an expert. But I'm working with someone else. And here's an important lesson for everyone. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to have all the answers. All you need to have is a good enough network so you know who to call to get the right answer. So I'm working with someone who we're putting in leases for 20 to 25 years. And those are the types that the pension companies want to buy. So the idea is we want to build a bit, and the goal is to sell a £100 million portfolio in the next 18 to 24 months. Now, I don't have that much property, and I can only do that by joint venturing, working with other people. And the idea is people bring properties to us that meet certain criteria, and they might have a certain value, but by putting the right contract in place, we can then sell it to a pension company at maybe a 6% yield, and we can increase the value more than the bricks and mortar value. And so there's a big uplift, and we share half that uplift. So my goal is, and I have a business partner who gets half the profit. So let's say it's about a £60 million portfolio. We can probably increase the value of that just by the contracts and the right tenants to 100 million. We'll share that 40 million profit. So whoever comes in is getting 20. And my business partner and I will make £10 million each out of that. That's my next goal. So I'm making it very public because it's good to have accountability on goals. And there might be people listening to this who want to say, oh, I want to come and get involved. But Absolutely. That's my goal. And so it's an area I don't have the expertise. I'm linking in with someone else who's got the expertise. And even if we can't sell it all, we'll have it very, very high cash flow in that portfolio. So that's what I'm personally doing. And I'm very excited about the market right now. Huge opportunities, not much competition because many people are sitting back, waiting to see what's going on. And that's what I'm personally doing over the next 18 to 24 months.
Amazing. Very interesting. I'm sure you get some people hopefully reach out, get some information on that. That sounds pretty cool. I know we're at the hour, Simon. I know you've got a lot going on. You've got to rush off. Just a couple of last questions. What motivation does someone in your position have? A wealthy guy, successful guy. Why don't you just cash out and leave the UK and go and live in the sun?
Well, first of all,
the UK is not the most supportive country, right?
No, it's not the most. And depending what the Labour government do, living overseas is not out of the question. But there's two important points here. One, I would consider going to live overseas. I have no kids. We've got 2 puppies. I don't have to be based in the UK because of Zoom, etc. I can do what I do from around the world. So I'm not averse to living elsewhere, but I actually quite like England.
Can I just say it's great to meet someone else who doesn't have kids. I'm a dog lover. No kids for me. Love it.
So I'm not tied in that way. And just like you're based in Spain, I can do what I do from an area around the world. But also, someone said, just cash it all and go. I couldn't sit on a beach because I'd go pink and crispy on a beach. I do like the sound of being so blonde. I have to be very careful.
I could see that. Yeah, you'd have to put Tipp-Ex all over yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, it looks like that pretty much. But here's the important thing. I could never do nothing. The thought of sitting on a beach, and I like holidays. I love skiing holidays, but when I've had a holiday, I want to get back to it. I want to do it again. I've got one of these minds. It's just constantly going all the time. And I would drive my wife crazy if I was around all the time, and she'd drive me crazy as well. So having something again, it comes back to passion. Having something you're passionate about, you want to keep doing it, right? And if you enjoy it and you're good at it, you'll get rewarded for your passion anyway, whatever that might be. So why would you stop?
Yeah, great answer. I guess, with technology now and the ability to travel so easily, you can run events from anywhere in the world, you know, and, maybe your market might shrink slightly, but I think there's definitely an opportunity where people would bite your arm off to be able to travel and do this stuff in the sun as opposed to a drafty conference center in Birmingham.
Obviously, even if you decide to leave the country for tax reasons, whatever, you can come back a certain amount of time and just very carefully manage your diary. But actually, we've done training. I have a small group of people I work with who are very successful people, and we run events all around the world. We've been up to Iceland to go and see the Northern Lights. We've been to America, Dubai, Sorrento. We go and have training events. And here's a cool thing, by the way. If you have someone who's organizing a training event overseas, you could put that event and the travel, the flights, you put it all through your business, legitimate expense. So I do those things. We have regular skiing trips, etc. So why not?
Couple of last questions here, Simon, before we wrap up, and I'll let you go. If you could go back to, let's say, 21 years old, what would 21 years old Simon Zutshci do today if you could go back and start over? What's the biggest lesson or the biggest takeaway that you would change?
Well, a couple of things. A general thing I would be is probably try not to be so trusting. I am a very trusting person. I like to think people are good people. I like to think people do the right stuff. I kind of think people will be like me. That's how I like to think I am. But unfortunately, there are some not so honourable people out there. And I think I have sometimes been too willing to help people and sometimes been taken advantage. My good nature's been taken advantage. So it's maybe a bit of a harsh lesson, really. But I'd say, Simon, just be a bit more careful who you do business with. That's one lesson. When it comes to property, for my first 7 years, until I did that property course in 2002, and probably for the first 10 years of my investing, till about 2005, to be honest, I was just dabbling in property. I was doing it as a part-time because I had my job, my career, then I had my business, my club business, etc. And property was always just a second thought. My biggest regret is not spending more time focusing on my property. And the benefit that people have today, listening to great podcasts like this, being able to watch YouTube videos, is hopefully listening to people like me and the other people out there saying, look, guys, just spend some time, have some focus on property. Because one of the great things about property, if you do it correctly, if you're not trading, but you're buying and holding, you can work once and get paid forever. When I stopped work at Cadbury's, because I stopped turning up, guess what? They stopped paying me, which is fair enough, I suppose. But my properties that I bought during that time, I still own, they still pay me. And you do need to put some time and effort in up front, obviously, but you can get rewarded. And even if you're doing a more complex essay that you specialize in, you need to treat that like a business, right? Yep. It's definitely not a hobby, but you can systemize it. You can get other people doing it. One of my students, who's a very successful investor, and he now helps people get VAs. His whole SA business is run by VAs. They can't do the cleaning, obviously, or the handiwork, but they can organize the cleaners. And so a big mistake that people make, and it's one that I made for a period of time, was I didn't value my time. So I do a lot of things myself, because I didn't realize how valuable my time was. Instead of paying someone else to do something, like managing my properties at first, I did it myself because I thought, hey, how hard can it be? I didn't want to pay a letting agent 10%.
So it saves some money, yeah.
I'd save some money because I'm trying to make this thing. Why would I give 10% to a letting agent? And you can absolutely manage a few properties, but the more you get to a point where you're spending more time managing than you are actually buying. You make the money buying. So there comes a point where people need to stop looking at the cost of things, i.e. paying a letting agent or paying a virtual assistant, and see the value you get from that. And your time is your most scarce and most precious resource. That's why people do training courses, to speed up the learning curve and get results quicker. That's why you should use letting agents and team to manage your properties, so you can do what you really want to do. So the lesson I would give myself is be slightly less trusting, do some more due diligence and research on people, focus on property, don't treat it like a hobby, really focus in on that, and make sure you value your time. You never know how much time you've got. Live the life you want to live. And if you put property in place to give you that freedom, then you can really do whatever you want with your life.
Yeah, it's so true. And with the time point, it's not really something that you fully appreciate until you start to get older. And then you're like, oh shit, I need to get a move on because, time's running out. Simon, I just want to say to you, just to reflect back, there's something within you, the way that you talk, the look in your eye, your actions, you really do come across as really one of the most genuine and passionate property trainers that I've met. And
thank you.
It really does come across. I've heard a lot of bad things about a lot of different companies, a lot of trainers. You see it all around on the websites and property tribes and here and there. I've got to say, I've never heard anything negative or bad about you, about your name, about your brand, about your business. You just come across in a really nice way. And I could definitely see why so many people have chosen to train with you. You've got a really nice way about you. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And look, I think, I like to think I try and make it as straightforward as possible for people to learn how to do these things. And I don't think property is difficult. It's not easy, but it's not difficult. It's very straightforward. And I just think the reason we've been around so long, and look, a bad company can only survive so long, because eventually they'll have so much social media, so much negative stuff out there, people realize they don't do business with them. So I think we've got to be doing something like the fact I've been training for 21 years and there are always negative people who don't think any training is good. But if you actually speak to people who've actually done our training, I think you'll really struggle to find someone who has not got value from it. And people have got varying results. I mean, people like Rick, you said, who's going to be interviewing, he was a policeman. He had no property experience. He took a sabbatical. Him and Lorraine threw us out, and they did amazing. I think 120 grand or something was their profit in their first year. Phenomenal, really lovely couple, and they just went for it, right? But we got so many people like that who've done just incredibly well, and I think part of that is because I like to think my superpower is just making it as straightforward as possible, saying here's what you do, and if people just go and do what we've told them to do, and they keep doing it, and they're persistent, they will get results eventually.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So lastly, Simon, what have you got coming up? What opportunities have you got for people listening that might want to reach out and get involved with Simon Zutshci?
So all I'd say, look, if you haven't read Property Magic, you should absolutely go and read Property Magic. And if you have read it, if you liked it, I'd love it if you can come and give me a 5-star review on Amazon or wherever you got it from. That's always appreciated. My new book, which is coming out imminently, is called Lease Options Magic. And it's all about lease options. It's been a long time in the coming. I'm just finishing it off now. So look out for that. That will come out very soon. And I'm pretty sure, we've had over 100,000 people read Property Magic. I think Lease Options Magic will be an even bigger book because lease options are such a misunderstood strategy. So I think that's going to work. And in chapter 6, I talk about it, but this is a full book about it. And look, if you've been to a PIN meeting, I recommend just go back, plug in to make sure. Yeah, there we go. That's me.
a lot much younger you.
I've got to have a more recent one on the new book. And But if you've been to PIN, go to PIN again, commit to go on a regular basis, and check out the other networking meetings as well, but commit to that. And if you've not been to a PIN meeting, I'm sure we'll put a link below, but you go to pinmeeting.co.uk, pick the local meeting, scroll down, check you do the data, they're all in the evening, during the week, check you can do the time. And then when it comes to pay, instead of paying, click on where it says pay with a voucher code. And if you use my surname, which is Zutshi, Zutshi, you fill in the details, and send you an email. You can come to your very first PIN meeting for free instead of paying the £25, just to come and check it out for yourself and see for yourself how good it is and how much it's going to help you. So that's my little gift to everyone. Just come and enjoy it. If you want to connect, reaching out through LinkedIn is a good way to do it. I do get lots of messages, so please bear with me. And I don't see all the messages. I have a VA doing a lot of that for me. But be persistent. If you want to do anything in life, be persistent. And Alex, you were pretty persistent to get this interview arranged. But thanks so much for asking. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope people have got some value from listening.
Yeah, thanks so much, Simon. It's been an absolute genuine honor to have you on the show. I think what you're doing is amazing. I think what you've done is amazing. I know what's going to be coming for you is going to be even more amazing. And just keep doing what you're doing. And I would recommend you to anyone who's looking at going out and doing some property training. I think what you're doing is great. So it's been an absolute honor. So thanks for everybody for listening and watching at home. Again, thank you, Simon, for joining. And until next time, we'll see you on another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. Until then, take care. Goodbye.